Do you ever get tired of looking at the same spot in a record and it just doesn't tell you what you want to know? I think I've got a solution that works part of the time. It's called looking outside the spotlight. So join me as we talk about that concept. Hey, it's Mark Lowe here with Kentucky, Tennessee Research. Another cold day. We haven't had snow in Tennessee today. It's amazing. We have it from time to time, but not like we used to. I mean, we got like 1.5 inches, 2 inches. I remember lots of snow to play in. You folks out west and up north, yeah, you've got more snow, but I know we like the sunshine. And by the way, the sun's already shining this afternoon. So thanks for joining me. I want to talk about something that I think sometimes helps us get focused on the real issue in regard to our research, and that's really looking outside the spotlight. And I know that seems a little bit odd in the concept, but bear with me. It's easy to have that spotlight of information that we focus on right there, what's in the center, the family that we're researching that has the same surname as us, or something that we know something about. But often we don't learn as much about those things that aren't in our focus, or what's in that area beside what we're just looking at. I learned a little bit, or was reminded a little bit more about that really not too long ago. Right where we are, there was a total eclipse. Many of you remember it, and I know lots of my friends travel to other places, even near here, to be in the total eclipse. We actually were at lunch at our favorite Mexican restaurant, and we waited, and it occurred, and we were all out there, and all the young waiters, and they were so amazed that I had created a box, a little camera, like we created when I was a kid, when there had been eclipses, so that we could look in the box and actually see this basically same image at the time as it was leading up to the eclipse. Okay? Well, let me just tell you, having experienced that one at that point in time, and remembering the light was being different, it wasn't the same effect. You noticed everything around you in a different light. Aha! That might be the clue. The clue often is not so much looking at what's not in the light, but really just paying attention to the stuff that's on the edge of your focus. And we often call that clustering, or looking at friends and neighbors, associates. Yeah, but what about looking at it a little bit differently? In my research over the years, I've sometimes encountered the same thing I'm facing right now. I'm kind of stuck in a situation, and I want to move in a direction. It seems like obvious to me that this person is a big character, and sometimes that's the problem. The big characters keep us from seeing the other characters who may be bigger in the picture, but just don't stand out at the moment. We sometimes need some help. I often need lots of help in regard to that. So to get my eye beyond that point, to look beyond that, I'll give you an example. Several years ago, in working on a project, and I came across, and this was for a television program, and this person was related and connected to Judge Isaac Parker, who I've always found fascinating, who was the district federal judge in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and covering that territory, kind of the Wild West. We've all seen TV shows about him. Well, I thought he was such a powerful character for this television show, but they didn't. And I kept going back to Judge Isaac Parker, Judge Isaac Parker, Judge Isaac Parker. And he just didn't seem to fit the bill for where we're going. I needed to look somewhere else. And it was really hard because he is such a captivating character. He's a big character. He was an interesting fellow. There were lots of great stories about him, but he wouldn't work. I had to look outside of that spotlight. And I needed some help. I needed lots of help. I could go back and look at the people that I was involved in here, but I needed some strategies. I'd like to call them outside the spotlight, but I might even call them eclipse strategies. How do we get past that dark spot? Okay? And that might be a good point, because we often don't see that what's around it because of that dark spot. And if we black out that dark spot, we might see the corona, or that area, the umbra, what's out there beyond that point. So I've got a few strategies that I think I want you to just think about in general. When we're getting stuck on a project, what might possibly help? Now, often if we're dealing with migration issues, or are looking around, or even if we're looking at people, if they're in the process of moving, then look at maps and gazetteers to identify possible trails or routes. Because often as we look at locations, if we look at the places along those routes, it might then give us another idea of where to look for other records. We can focus then on the communities or centers that are market centers along that route. Now, that's always, we should be doing that anyway, but sometimes we need to get off of that main character and look at those around. We could follow my trail. If we're looking at an individual, then let's look at the letters, the diaries, the manuscripts, the other things that might be there besides just basic records. And if we're focused on one person, what about those people who were either traveling with that person or before or after? Others on that trail. It could be neighbors, acquaintances, maybe strangers, but they became acquainted because they followed the same trail. And sometimes we focus so much upon that center point that we fail to see all of that variety of folks that are around it. We've got to discover those who followed even nearby trails and routes. Now, that seems to be talking about travel, but it doesn't have to be. It can be in a town, in a city, on a street. Who are the ones who lived nearby? Did they have an effect on the community? Who was the mayor? Who were the aldermen? Who was the minister? Who was the choir director? Who were the people that influenced others in their behavior, actions in the areas where we're searching? And that's what we need to do. That's looking outside the spotlight, okay? Let me give you an example. Not so much who this person is, who absolutely was one of the most wonderful people I ever researched, but he was a school teacher. And as in the obvious question in the process, I wanted to find out more about him. And I hate to say it, but one of the obvious questions to me was, well, when did he pass away? When did he die? But that is only one part of the question. If I want to discover more about him and that realm of people around him, if he's a school teacher, where did he teach? Are there records? Are there colleagues? Are there other teachers? Are there parents? Are there notes? Are there records of him teaching and records of other things related to that? For example, if he's a teacher, depending on the time period, where did he learn to teach? Where did he get his training? Are there records there as well? Do you see what I'm trying to do? Do you see the concept they're trying to make here? What I'm trying to do is to think in a different way. Sometimes when I get stuck on that moment, it's looking beyond that point. This week I was going through, I'm always going through something, always going through boxes, files. But when I ran across a little patch, L&N, from the L&N Railroad, Louisville and Nashville Railroad. My grandparents worked with the L&N. I lived on the L&N railroad track growing up. I still do. It's now changed. It's beyond that at the point. But the reference here, people all the time asking me, what about somebody who worked for the L&N? And we tend to think about these particular records, and there are records, definitely. But there are also things about the stories of the individuals who worked for railroads, individuals who worked for other companies. Where are their thoughts, their ideas? Often they may be in the family's hands. They're still in a box somewhere, like this was. Back in that process. They might be at a historical society or a museum. And in particular to those transportation issues, which we've talked about with marriage and why somebody married in a different place, that Gretna Green, that concept of going somewhere else to be married, that's what you've got to think about, is looking at the parameters and then looking beyond the parameters at the people who are on the edge. the people who may crisscross that center. Everybody has a story, and everybody may have a part of your story if they're in the same confines, within the same area. So we might need to look a little more often at that concept, and I think that helps us if we'll do that. So with that in mind, even in that same thought, as I begin to look at this gentleman, he lived in Memphis in Shelby County, Tennessee, and in 1897 there was a city census for the city of Memphis, and then of course the 1900 Shelby County census. Now I know it's difficult for you to see here, but what I was doing is making notes, and I was trying to determine, for example, when he passed away, and I was having trouble finding that. So I was following him, continuing to say, okay, if I'm looking at that point in time, what does that family look like in 1900 or in 1897? And so in this case, he's not listed in that 1900 schedule. He's not there. In 1897, you'll notice in 1900 there's Lizzie, and I marked that red arrow. It says she's a widow. Well, that's the sister-in-law of the head of that household where she's living. Well, okay. In 1897, she's there. There's the initials there of showing who was in that Memphis, city of Memphis census as well. All of these are steps and processes, but we've got to consider often other sources for information. Looking outside the light does not mean we don't shine the light on some new records or shine the light on good resources, but it's never a bad idea to think outside the box. So often when I get really frustrated, and I'm often frustrated occasionally because I can't find things as quickly as I want, I'm often more upset at myself because I know where they should be, but I need to find more. So just take a deep breath. Look outside the box. Look inside the box. Look out on the around the box. And look at the label on the box. What does that mean? That's my reminder to tell me I have got to cite all the things that I view, whether they help me or not, so that at some point in time I will know what I've looked at, and if I need to, I know where it was so I can look at it again. So citations often help me resolve problems in the future because step by step I do what I need to do. By the way, the answer to my question in this point, his death date was located in the R.L. Polk Memphis Directory for 1899. He had died in September of 1898. Now, that's different than a normal vital record. So again, think outside the box. Look outside the box. Look at the label. When you're looking at the image of whatever you're seeing, remember, if you're having problems finding the answers, instead of looking at the person, look at the people around that person. I had a great friend of mine who was a really good artist. Very humble, though. She never considered herself a good artist. But when we would talk about the things that she did, she would tell me that one of the things that she did that she learned the most from was in art school, and that she would draw. And she said, you don't draw the object. You actually draw the edge. You draw outside of that object. You draw its surroundings, such that if you moved that object, the surroundings would be there and you could still see the object. I'm like, it's exactly what I'm talking about now. I need to find out more about that object in the center. And if I look at what's around that object, when that object is gone, I should be able to see even more clearly where that object stood and what was related to that object. Does that make any sense at all? It does help me, and I'm hoping it helps you, that when we look around, when we pay attention, and we look outside the box, when we look around, it really does help us to see the things that sometimes that we say we can't see. We can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes that we can't focus because there's too much detail, and that when we look around, we can see it. Consider some of those strategies as we're talking about. Consider going beyond that point. Considering if you've got a box full of stuff, what's in that box? Now, if you're like me and at some point in time I've gone through it and I put a label on it, that label lists what's there. You see the difference? That's a general listing of what's there, but that's not the same as looking at every item in that box, examining it, looking at it again. Perhaps something was dropped in there that I didn't make on my list. Hey, that happens. And so I think what we're talking about here is don't be surprised when new things pop up. Don't be afraid to look again at something you've looked at before. Don't be afraid to look a little closer. Perhaps you need to change the lighting so that you can see this object more clearly. I can guarantee you when I go back through my information, and I'll be looking more closely at all the things I've collected over the years related to the L&N, related to my family, related to the transportation industry in this area. It's an important part of the lives of the people that I study often. So much to do, so little time. I'm hoping you're taking advantages of all the educational opportunities with folks who are sharing information, trying new things, looking around, just doing something different every day. You know, part of it is just the idea of having a good time and enjoying the research. Find a new resource like I did, use it. But more importantly, don't be afraid to look outside the spotlight, because outside the spotlight is where we're going to find the stuff that we haven't seen. We need to turn the light around. Maybe I'll figure out how to turn the spotlight out on the outside and learn more. Now, if you're enjoying what we're talking about, I encourage you to join us by subscribing so that you'll get a notice of every time that we have a new YouTube video available. If you've got questions, listen. If you've used the idea of looking outside the spotlight, share some ideas in the comments below. Let me know how you're using some of the things we're talking about for research, because look, I learned more from you guys than I can possibly hope to even get done in the next few months. And join me next time as we continue to learn more about what the great things happen when we do a little research. By the way, have a great day. We'll see you next time.